Okay, my clicker. So after the announcements, then I'll start the PowerPoint and then we'll just be in the PowerPoint for these three things. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Bloomington Rotary Club's weekly celebration of service. I'm Steve Wicks and I'm honored to serve as your president this year. Please silence your electronic devices. So today's program will touch on a number of themes. We'll start with the sad, move to the serious, move to celebratory, and then finally most of the hour will be spent with the thought-provoking. So I'll start by announcing, as almost all of you know, that last week our longtime member, Charlotte Zitlow, passed away. We will have a short tribute to her next week. But for today, if we could just have a moment of silence for Charlotte, please. Thank you very much. If you would all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and when we're done, veterans, please remain standing. I pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And once again, would veterans please remain standing? Do we have any veterans on Zoom?
No.
So, veterans, thank you all for your service. And for club members, if you get a chance today and as a veteran, as a friend, family member, please thank them for their service. Can we have a round of applause for our veterans? Thank you. On this day in history, November 11th, 1918, the Armistice Agreement was signed, formally ending World War I, known at that time as the War to End All Wars. 3 years later, on November 11th, 1921, the tomb of the unknown soldier was dedicated at Arlington National Cemetery. David Wright will share today's reflection.
So I'm 5 years old, and I'm at the State Museum with my grandfather for 2.5 hours. And he's reading every single placard in every single exhibit with slow, contemplative demeanor. He's embodying the wisdom of Socrates. Be slow to speak and only after reflection. Once home, we're playing a game of chess, and he is contemplating every move forever. And I have no choice but to do the same. Later, he's reading the paper cover to cover, a book from beginning to end. And you guessed it, as a little 5-year-old with no TV and no devices, I have no choice but to do the same. Because of my grandfather, I became a voracious reader. And because of my grandfather, contemplation became a part of who I am. My only regret is that I never got to share the wisdom with him of the knowledge he gained from all those books he read every day, from all the articles and contemplations he had, because he was the strong, silent type. But I was always proud of him, and he is an important part of my history. And it is because of my grandfather that I now feel like a stranger in a strange land. News articles and books have been replaced by short videos and blogs. Those have been replaced by TikToks and tweets. And now, those have been replaced by 5-word memes and emojis. It seems like our civil discourse is becoming less and less contemplative every day. And it seems like there's not any time left for discussing the why behind the what. And when that happens, sometimes our society forgets the why altogether. It's happened over time. Today is a good example. The purpose of Veterans Day has been slowly forgotten. Well, the second half of it. Here's a quote from one of the presidential proclamations a while back. Quote, "To acknowledge the respect and admiration we have for our veterans, the Congress has designated November 11th to be a legal holiday to be known as Veterans Day and has dedicated it to the cause of world peace." For a while, I thought that was way back when, because it got passed in 1938. But this quote is from Richard Nixon, of all people, in 1970. But then over the last few decades, that kind of why behind the what kind of faded away. We remembered the fight, but are starting to forget what we were fighting for. And today's topic serves as a similar reminder about the importance of the why behind the what. We're about to discuss how freedom of speech is under siege. Like Veterans Day, it too has its own deeper purpose: the search for truth and accountability. But that purpose becomes clouded if we do not work to act on it. If we do not realize that we are the ones who are supposed to be speaking, if we, the principled leaders of our community, do not promote our ideals, call out transgressions, and pass on our knowledge and wisdom for the next generation, then our silence becomes a self-imposed threat to free speech as well, simply leaving more room for those who sow deception, prejudice, and ill intent. So in honor of my grandfather and his gift of contemplation, And in honor of our guest speaker today, Professor Sanders and others like him who work to defend our right to speak, I offer this reflection. We all also have the right to remain silent. But I'm beginning to believe that remaining silent just isn't right.
Thank you, David. Peggy Frisbee will introduce our guest today.
Good afternoon. I'm here to introduce our guests of today, and when I announce your name, guests, please stand so that we can welcome you. First, Shane Gibson, a guest of Jim Bright. Shane is engaged in real estate. Next is Jim Rodenbush, also a guest of Jim Bright, who says he's in academia. And then Daniel Schlegel. I knew I could do it. Guest of the club and a historian. And then our last guest of today is Jalen Guiton. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. Guest of Peyton Flynn. Do we have any guests online?
Hi, Peggy. Hi, everyone. No guests, just Rotarians.
Well, thank you for coming today. And if you have any questions about Rotary, please ask anyone at your table or anyone in the room. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. We have 3 Rotary birthdays to celebrate today. On the 14th, Trent Deckard. On the 16th, Lydia Potter. And on the 17th, Katie Cerniak. Also, we have anniversaries to observe. Tomorrow on the 12th, both Don and Carol Ann Hustler, 1 year. On the 16th, our greeter for today, Ruth Boschkoff, 4 years. And on the 17th, past President Jim Cryway, 37 years. Announcements. Make sure you're saving the date for the annual club holiday party. It's scheduled for December 11th at the Bloomington Country Club, and we'll have more details coming up next week. Posting for the club executive assistant is still open. We tentatively plan to close this posting on the 15th. Rotary Global Scholarship recipient Noah Jager wrote a well-written letter to the editor at the Herald Times about Rotary. If you haven't read it, the link to it hopefully will be in this week's roundabout, or I'm sure you can go into the Herald Times online and find it. As of today, we still need a roundabout reporter for the month of December. Marilyn Wood is sitting at the back of the room. See her if you are interested. Get ready to serve. In the weeks ahead, we'll need club members to help put the finishing touches on our Meals on Wheels district grant project. We'll need lots of volunteers for our annual Salvation Army bell ringing. So Meals on Wheels. We need 10 people total. I think Diana Hoffman has 5 signed up so far. It'll be next week during the week, 11 to roughly 12:30. And you'll be riding with Meals on Wheels drivers, and you're delivering the Rotary sponsored insulated bags to clients. So you won't need to drive. The bags aren't heavy. There isn't any heavy lifting involved. 10 routes. Once again, we have 5 people signed up. We need 5 more, and you may choose any day. And then there'll be a follow-up indoor activity with Meals and Wheels in January. And that will involve filling their freezer. Salvation Army bell ringing. That's one we've done every year for some time. We need 26 volunteer slots to fill over 3 successive Saturdays, November 29th, December 6th, December 13th, There is a sign-up sheet moving between tables. Dave Maurer, Michelle Cohen can help you if you have questions. But typically they are 2-hour shifts. You usually ring with another Rotarian. So I found it as a great opportunity to get to know other club members. And you just see lots of people in the community, and almost everyone's in a good mood. And it's a really important cause, especially this year when times are tough for a lot of our residents here in Monroe County. Dave? Ah, yes. Okay. So it won't be freezing cold, but it will be in that area, and that's a good area. One of our organizational members, Wheeler Mission, they have scheduled a 5K run, walk, dash for shelter at Cars Farm Park on Saturday, December 6th. Please see me if you'd like additional information. I'll try to get the information in the roundabout. And I'm sure if you don't want to walk or run, they'd appreciate volunteers. The Red Cross is also an organizational member. I noticed they're having a blood drive downstairs in the Frangipani room. So after we listen to Steve Sanders, if our blood pressure is really high, might be a chance to go down and relieve some pressure. I'm not sure if that's a medically appropriate procedure. Once again, we are members of the Chamber of Commerce. They are members of our organization. Their next business after hours is Thursday, November 13th. That's on Thursday, 5:30 to 7:30 at Beltrace Senior Living Community. And now we have a lot of service to celebrate. Tyler, can you put on the... So as Rotarians, we're called to serve. And once again, it's been 2 weeks since we've had a regular meeting. So I'll start with RILA. October 31st to November 2nd, about 45 high school students got together at Bradford Woods. On the left, you can see a picture of the 3 young men that we sponsored. One is Rex Hillary's grandson. One is club member Erica Kovacs's son, and then the friend of her son. And then on the right, picture of Joy Harder. Joy spent about 5 hours on Friday registering everyone, did a lot of work. So I want to thank those 3 individuals. Next, celebrate FutureCast, November 4th. Once again, October was Economic Development Month for Rotary. FutureCast is all about economic development. Here's a picture of Lauren Snyder giving the reflection, and you can see the Rotary 4-way test banner right next to it. And Lauren did a really good job. In addition to that, Lauren's firm, Baird Wealth Management, sponsored our club's costs of being a sponsor. And then Kyla Cox-Deckard did all the work behind the scenes putting this together on behalf of our club. So thank you, Lauren and Kyla. Then finally, the Rotary Toast, November 7th. This is our biggest club event of the year. This is where, first of all, it ends up in being a really significant charitable donation for the recipients' charity of choice, which this year was the Bloomington North Habitat for Humanity Club. And then secondly, some of the proceeds are used to fund the community services giving for the 3 Rotary clubs. So it's a really big deal. It's a lot of work. On the left, you see a picture of some of our club members and members of the other clubs getting the place ready, decorating before the event. Here's a picture on the right of club member Shelley Yoder speaking at the event. So first of all, big thank you for Tracy. She took it on this year. And in typical Tracy fashion, it's done with a lot of energy, a lot of attention to detail, and it's done well. And we had a sellout. So it was a very successful event. And then we had other club members who helped. Alan Barker, Ron Barnes, Jim Bright, Marcus Debro, Andrea Murray, Lynn Schwartzberg, Heidi Schultz, Shelley Yoder, Charlotte Zitlow, and John Zodi. In addition, Jim Bright, Andrew Murray, and Jeff Richardson all purchased tables. And then club members. We had a number of club members who attended FutureCast and a number of club members who purchased Rotary Toast tickets. So lots of things to celebrate. And now we'll move to the Mystery Rotarian. Once again, the rules are, I'll give a clue. If you know the answer, put up your hand. Don't shout it out. If you're online, put up your hand electronically. First clue. A native of Decatur, Illinois, this Rotarian served in the U.S. Army. After finishing military service, this Rotarian used the GI Bill to earn multiple degrees, including a doctorate from Indiana State. Put up your hand if you know. Okay. Second clue, and I'm going to pronounce this word wrong. This Shidokan Karate second degree black belt currently serves as executive director of the IU Department of Mentoring Services and Leadership Development. I see well, a few more. Okay. Third and final clue. A club member for over 4 years, this Rotarian currently serves as chairperson of the club DEI committee and as a member of the District 65 DEI committee. Put up your hands. Okay, we have a lot more here. And this week's Mystery Rotarian is Patrick Smith. Patrick has served on the State of Indiana Commission on the Social Status of Black Males. During his military service, served as a member of military intelligence. And in the case of Patrick, military intelligence does go together. Pretty smart guy. And he served in the DMZ region of South Korea, so a hot spot then and still a hot spot. And also in Panama during the Noriega era. So some of you remember that in our country's history. He's been with IU for almost 20 years, and Patrick is part of a power couple. His wife, Dr. Candace Smith, is a lecturer, African-American and African diaspora studies. So anyway, congratulations, Patrick. Jim Sins and Dakir, you put your hand up about the same time. Did you both have it right? Okay, good job. Joy, did anyone get it online?
Other than me at the last, with the last slide, knowing it was Patrick. Nice to learn about him.
Okay. We are running a little bit behind, so I'm going to do the Rotary International 7 areas of focus. And we've moved into November, which is Rotary Foundation Month. And what I will say is that our Happy Dollars proceeds in November and December will be given to the Rotary Foundation. I had planned on Happy Dollars. I don't want to take any time away from our speaker. So Byron, if you couldn't come in and come up and introduce our speaker.
As best I recall, our speaker this afternoon was first introduced to me by one of our distinguished former Rotarians, Kent Owen. Kent thought that Steve Sanders was someone I should know and would want to know, and he was right. Some years later, Steve, who served for some years as a member of the Bloomington Human Rights Commission, was instrumental in recruiting me to apply for a vacancy on that commission, which led to my appointment by the city's Common Council and to 20-something years of service on the Human Rights Commission of Bloomington. You may know Steve in various other capacities. He has been an important and articulate public voice in advocating for matters related to constitutional law, as well as human rights, academic freedom, and current threats to our cherished democratic republic. The current degradations to which IU is being subjected have also recently received his focused attention. There may be no one in our community better qualified by virtue of his credentials and experience to warrant this attention. Steve Sanders is Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, Professor of Law, and the Val Nolan Faculty Fellow at the IU Maurer School of Law. His primary teaching and research areas are constitutional law, and his work has appeared in major law journals and has been cited in the New Yorker, the Atlantic, the Washington Post, Federal District Court opinions and briefs to the United States Supreme Court and other federal courts. He is a three-time winner of an IU Trustees Teaching Award and is frequently quoted by local and national media about matters of constitutional law and the U.S. Supreme Court. I don't have the title of his address in front of me, but it's something about, does anybody care about human rights? Or no, about free speech anymore. Steve Sanders.
Thank you, Byron. In deference to Steve, I will try not to raise your blood pressure too much. I know you didn't leave emergency contact information at the door. And I have appreciated this club ever since, as Byron mentioned, our late mutual friend Kent Owen actually nominated me back in 1992, 1993 for a Rotary exchange program to Brazil. And I just hadn't done a lot of international travel at that point, and that gave me a month in a completely different culture. And I was always grateful to Rotary for giving me that experience. So as Byron said, the title of my talk is, does anyone actually believe in free speech anymore? We routinely hear politicians and activists on both the left and the right praising free speech and accusing the other side of being against it. But is this sincere commitment or just posturing? Political liberalism has always been identified with a commitment to free speech, but today the political left is dominated not by liberals, but by progressives, and evidence suggests many progressives put other political priorities ahead of free speech. For example, the ACLU was once known as a group that gave meaning to the view attributed to the French philosopher Voltaire. I do not agree with a word you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. The ACLU, after all, famously defended the right of the Nazis to march in Skokie, Illinois in the 1970s. Yet in recent years, the ACLU has abandoned this approach. Its guidelines on selecting cases for litigation now say the group will consider, quote, the potential effect on marginalized communities and the extent to which speech may assist in advancing the goals of groups which are contrary to our views. Ira Glasser, who led the ACLU from 1978 to 2001, said the new policy was the most fundamental departure from ACLU founding principles you could possibly have. Within my own area of legal academia, Professor Louis Michael Seidman of Georgetown Law School, one of the most prominent people in our profession, has argued that free speech simply cannot be progressive. He says it entrenches dominant voices and too often privileges elites at the expense of the marginalized. Modern progressives, Professor Seidman has said, just can't shake their mindless attraction to the bright flame of our free speech tradition. Progressives need to turn away before they are burned. Well, how about the political right? In recent years, political conservatives contrasted their implied commitments to free speech with the cancel culture on American college campuses and the political left more generally. On his first day in office this year, Donald Trump signed an executive order that it is, quote, the policy of the United States to secure the right of the American people to engage in constitutionally protected speech and to assure that no taxpayer resources are used to facilitate any conduct that would unconstitutionally abridge the free speech of any American citizen. Sounds great, right? But what to make of this as we watched federalized troops deployed to American cities to intimidate and interfere with small and largely peaceful protests? What to make of this as Trump uses unconstitutional assertions of executive power to punish journalists, universities, and law firms for their speech and viewpoints? In 2021, Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita wrote, quote, "The free expression of political beliefs should be encouraged, even if we do not agree with the beliefs. It is this free dialogue," he said, "the free exchange of ideas, good and bad, that fosters our self-governance." Yet, this is the same Attorney General whose noisy public demands got a staff member from Ball State University, Suzanne Swierk, fired. Swierk expressed her political beliefs and exchanged her ideas in the form of a Facebook post about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Swierk's post was passionately worded. It did not cross any lines of legality. It certainly did not advocate violence, yet Rokita could not abide it, and he used his power as a government official to attempt to ruin Swierk's life. Public employees have First Amendment rights as long as their private, outside the office speech does not substantially disrupt their employer's workplace or its ability to carry out its job. Swierk's case is now in federal court, and I predict that Ball State, after spending several $100,000 on the expensive Washington lawyers it has hired, will lose. That's because no facts have come to light suggesting that the legal bar for substantial disruption was cleared here. The fact that some people were upset or angered by Swierk's comments likely will not be found by a court sufficient to qualify as substantial disruption. As I wrote about the case in the Indy Star, if people who didn't like Swierk's social media comments could simply manufacture substantial disruption through their extravagant overreaction, or if politicians could do so by their public bullying, then the First Amendment would protect very little. So to this point, I've tried to sketch, I hope not unfairly, a few high-profile examples of what I see as hypocrisy on both sides when it comes to free speech. But why is this kind of self-serving behavior a problem when it comes to an important constitutional right and principle of human freedom? Simply stated, a commitment to free speech must be a neutral principle. A principle is neutral when it can be generalized, when it applies without regard to the identity, popularity, or politics of the speaker or cause. Why are neutral principles important? The First Amendment is not merely about protecting individual speakers. It is a guarantee that the marketplace of ideas remains open. Without neutral principles, free speech becomes merely a partisan slogan and cudgel. When constitutional rights, like the First Amendment, are litigated in court, they must be applied neutrally and consistently across cases, regardless of who is benefited or burdened. Otherwise, courts lose credibility with the public. In the Ball State case, the question will be not whether Swierk's statements were good or bad, popular or unpopular, whether they angered powerful people, but rather whether they objectively, according to objective standards, created a substantial disruption to Ball State's operations. And as I said, I don't think that test is likely to be met. The requirement for neutral principles is not just a matter of legal doctrine, it's a moral commitment. It insists on intellectual honesty. It insists on the courage to criticize our political allies when necessary, and the courage to defend the rights of speakers we disagree with. And neutrality isn't always about political partisanship. Indiana University arguably abandoned neutrality when it imposed a policy prohibiting nighttime political protests, a ban that was later found unconstitutional by a federal court. But IU was more than happy to have hundreds of students happily gathering on campus overnight and voicing their support for their team when ESPN's College Game Day came to town. And so, again, this is the difference between encouraging speech we like while banning speech we find problematic or inconvenient, even if there's not necessarily an element of partisanship to it. And so if we really believe in free speech, I think we must reject the thinking, as the historian and journalist Nat Hentoff titled one of his books, "Free Speech for Me, but Not for Thee." A similar commitment to neutral principles is necessary, I think, for the proper functioning of academic freedom, which Byron noted is also an interest of mine. It's academic freedom overlaps with free speech and the First Amendment. They have distinct principles, but they are related. By academic freedom, I mean the principle that faculty should be free to engage in the creation and dissemination of knowledge, free of constraints, free of censorship by the government. Yet many, and that universities should be largely allowed to govern themselves. Yet many universities seem to have given up on these neutral principles. Being a neutral principle means academic freedom must rest on something more than faculty or institutional self-interest. The idea that universities should be largely left alone is a social compact. In exchange for a degree of autonomy, universities function as unique social institutions devoted to rigorous analysis, the free flow of ideas, and the discovery of new knowledge. As the American Association of University Professors recognized more than a century ago, public acceptance of our work as faculty members depends on it being seen as disinterested expression and as unbiased inquiry. The University of Chicago's 1967 Calvin Report said a university must remain institutionally neutral on political and social controversies. And that reason is the university, this report written by the famous First Amendment scholar, Professor Calvin, university cannot take collective action on the issues of the day without engendering the conditions for its existence and effectiveness. Calvin said that the university is the home and the sponsor of critics. It is not itself the critic. Like any other speaker, I feel obliged to close on some sort of optimistic or at least positive note, although, there may not be much among the wreckage that I've talked about. So let me offer this one quotation from a speech titled "The Spirit of Liberty," given by the great former Federal Court of Appeals Justice in New York, Learned Hand. Hand was speaking at an event called I Am an American Day in New York in 1944. This was an event that celebrated newly naturalized citizens. Judge Hand said, "The spirit of liberty is the spirit which seeks to understand the mind of other men and women. The spirit of liberty is the spirit which weighs their interests alongside its own without bias." And something I find that I agree with the older I get, the spirit of liberty, Judge Hand said, is the spirit which is not too sure that it is right. So, thank you. And I wanted to keep that relatively compact because I suspected this was going to be this was also going to be a topic where there could be a lot of questions and discussion, and I would love to be a part of that as long as we have.
Do we have any questions out there?
And I don't know if somebody else will keep the queue or if I should just, was that Jim I said?
I got it right
Okay,
here.
all right.
Thank you, Steve, for the presentation. The first thing I want to say is that, first of all, I'm not afraid of the governor, the lieutenant governor, the secretary of state, or our attorney general. But thank you. But as a politician, I served 2 terms on city council. I understand that a lot of my speech had to have been tempered during that time, mainly because of the funding sources and the threat against that. Move forward. Now I'm the president of the NAACP. We are nonpartisan. We're not apolitical. And I feel no threat to speak on what is right for our organization. So my question to you is, should I have anything to fear individually from our political leaders with regard to our free speech and organizations such as that? I will say we just wrote a letter about the university and had it, we posted it against the takeover of the board of trustees, the kidnapping, I should say. and the elimination of the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs.
Right.
So should I still be comfortable in saying what we think is
Well,
correct against what we think is wrong?
I mean, the NAACP is a private organization. I think at the end of the day, legally, the only thing you have to worry about is your board of directors and whether they're happy with what you're saying or unhappy with what you're saying. You don't get funding, I assume, from the state or any other entity that could make a political judgment. So I would say no. I mean, the only thing you might face, and is just if Todd Rokita, the governor, somebody else decides to use their bully pulpit to publicly attack you in some way or denounce you in some way. That's what you have to worry about. Now that in one sense, that's just the rough and tumble, the free flow of ideas and debate. But, we're talking about people who have bigger social media accounts and access to the media and megaphones than perhaps you do. And so my sense off the cuff is the only thing you have to worry about is, whether you feel you can adequately defend yourself, whether your membership will stand up for its interests if it's attacked or criticized by people on the other side of what you're advocating for. Sure.
Other questions?
Yes. I see a question. And I can move around, right? Is this okay? Okay.
I would worry about his financial ability if somebody does decide to bring a suit. And that's a large part of the president's,
So, but Jim's, you mean, or when you say
Well,
his?
anybody who's
Yeah.
being sued,
Mhm,
if they want to have a defense,
mhm,
they have to hire a lawyer.
mhm.
And some people have much bigger pockets. And I think that may be something that he could worry about, whether or not it's a
Mhm.
worthwhile suit. He still might have to pay, or the organization, for
Mhm.
defense.
Yeah. It's certainly possible. This term lawfare has come into being where you use the law to try to harass your enemies. Again, offhand, a private organization, a membership organization, an advocacy organization like that, I can't offhand, if we're talking about an organization like the NAACP, imagine on what basis someone could sue them. I assume Jim is not going to libel anybody. I mean, if you libel somebody, there's a legal definition for defamation. Well, that's true. And there's no safeguard other than hopefully a court doing its job and moving toward an early dismissal of an unmeritorious lawsuit.
I'll add
Dave.
to that as well. Because I follow refugee and immigration issues here as a volunteer in the community, I've been following closely the state attorney general's work and efforts to chill organizations that are engaged in working with immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers, and the like. And so there's another branch of that lawfare, as you put it, that doesn't come before a court, but rather Rokita has launched requests for information and investigations into organizations. One of note is Exodus Refugee Immigration, which is based in Indianapolis, but has an office in Bloomington. And so, alleging potential for human trafficking, which of course they work on the opposite side of human trafficking, and not following their nonprofit charter and violating the law. So, that's not defensible. That's just it's not. It doesn't go to court. It only goes between the Attorney General's office and so that stuff is happening.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's a reflection of speech, or it's a reflection of trying to chill their action in the work that they do.
Yeah. I don't know the specifics of the case you're talking about. I've read some headlines, I think. I think the only thing I can say is that at the end of the day, Attorney General Rokita is a lawyer. He is accountable to not just the ordinary law that we're all accountable, but to special ethical professional obligations that are applicable under the Bar Association's regulations that are applicable only to lawyers. Now, he has found himself on the wrong side of those ethical rules in the past, and that's been in the headlines. I mean, if he abuses his office, if he abuses his power as the state's lawyer, there are disciplinary mechanisms available to attempt to hold him to account. Again, I'm not making a judgment because I don't know the facts of this situation, but that is one place where it's useful that lawyers are supposed to be held to a particularly high standard of ethical conduct.
Steve, if someone had told me just a few years ago that a lecturer would be banned from the classroom because a student called a US senator objecting to a graphic and that senator called the dean, does this not just violate what academic freedom is all about? And it just reminds me of totalitarian place where students or where people are, told to complain, to put in complaints to higher powers. It's the most authoritarian thing that I can imagine.
Yeah.
Is there, how can we have changed so much so fast?
I have, I don't know if you've heard about the case that Judy is talking about. I have some complicated takes on that I've, been arguing with people on Facebook as usual. My take, so this was a graphic that talked about like, this is overt white supremacy and this is covert white supremacy. And what was listed as covert white supremacy included a lot of things that I would not call white supremacy, but it's a graphic that's often used in DEI trainings and so forth. Now, this was a class where students are graded. And so my sort of hot take on that is if this professor of this lecture was using that slide as an artifact for learning and discussion, let's think critically about this. Are these things really white supremacy? What do we mean by white supremacy? And, can tying these other kinds of things, particular behaviors or attitudes, should those be called white supremacy? If she used it as the launching point for a critical discussion, then of course, as a matter of academic freedom, I think it is protected. I think she might have a lawsuit if that was interfered with, because we are in a federal circuit that says what teachers do in the classroom is protected by the First Amendment. What I said on Facebook was, if, however, she was using this particular slide and she was teaching it essentially as truth, this is what you must believe to succeed in this class, then I'd have problems with it because from an academic freedom standpoint, because the AAUP back in 1915 said that professors' academic freedom doesn't include the right to politically indoctrinate vulnerable and impressionable students. So much of this as an academic freedom matter, I think depends on how that slide was used. In political science, it's the difference between teaching a scholarly article, which you could say this is the best that our discipline can come up with in the refinement of knowledge, versus teaching somebody's political speech. And you can pick it apart, but you don't put it forth as truth. Now, the point you're raising is essentially just how this came to be, IU's reaction to it. Yes, we live in a time where politicians feel increasingly, I am certain that back in the days when I worked for Ken Gross-Lewis, in the 1990s, that there were politicians who, brought complaints to the chancellor and the deans, but they didn't become as high profile as this. And the response was not as harsh. The idea that you pull some, I'm not involved in that. I think as an associate dean myself, I need to be a little careful about criticizing the decision makers of people in other schools. I would just say that I do think it is a somewhat harsh response to say we have to investigate this. That used to be the kind of thing we saved for really grievous things like an assault on a student or something like that. And so I do think, you called it authoritarian, your word. I think a lot depends on how the university reacts to this. If there is a thoughtful discussion and analysis of how this was being used in the class, the slide in and of itself is not necessarily objectionable. It all depends on the context of what was happening in the class. So I just hope that this gets resolved quickly. And I hope that the university, if it's necessary to do so, is not afraid to tell Senator Banks, sorry, we looked into this, but it's academically appropriate. I hope.
Question online.
Yeah, Joy?
Yes, actually, I'm representing Michael Shermas, who is driving, and I'm asking this question for him. Steve, he'd like to know, how much worse do you think it will get in terms of our free speech rights being taken away? Do you think we're headed down a path of an authoritarian government taking bigger chunks of our free speech rights away?
I think the short answer is simply yes, but I want to say, there's a lot there. What level of government are we talking about? What speech rights are we talking about? Are we talking about my free speech rights in the classroom to teach a subject as I feel is appropriate to teach it? Are we talking about my free speech rights here in a public setting? Are we talking about a letter to the editor that I write on a public issue? I do think as a general principle, not just for the reasons I talked about, that we've lost sight of neutrality, but in a more general way, yes, free speech is under attack. People find comfort in strong leaders and borderline authoritarianism and seem to place less faith. I think free speech requires a commitment of principle. It's not something that necessarily makes your daily life easier. And so I guess I hope I'm not fudging on Michael's question. In a sort of broad general way, I think yes, but I would want to discuss again, what is the specific context we're talking about? What is the government behavior we're talking about? I mean, I don't feel my free speech rights are threatened. I hope I'm not being naive, but I would not want to be the president of a university or the head of a law firm that was facing down the federal government and having conditions imposed on it that limit its freedom of expression, professional function, and so forth.
Okay, Tim?
Thank you very much for coming. It's a message we need to hear. Some of us recently have seen The Wizard of Oz, and we learned about courage. You have shown a remarkable lot of courage in your statements, and I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
My question is, there is a federal judge who now has resigned so that he can critique the current administration. Do you think we will see more courage on the behalf of our elected and judicial officials to come forth and speak outwardly with courage as you have done?
Well, at least in terms of the federal government, when it comes to Congress, no, absolutely not. I mean, there has been a complete, the logic of our Constitution is that you would have branches not just of equal power, but of equal jealousy in guarding their prerogatives. That has completely broken down with the lack of any sort of functional, effective Congress willing to assert its prerogatives in the face of the kind of clear executive overreach we have seen. So in that political realm and the congressional side, no, we clearly don't see that. On the judicial side, I mean, from what I have seen, we have judges voicing increasing frustration, increasing skepticism, attempting to do their jobs, blocking things that are, that need to be blocked, and doing so with well-reasoned opinions, except for the Supreme Court, which does a lot of things and doesn't provide much of an opinion on it. But, my great fear is that the courts are fooling themselves if they think at the end of the day they can enforce some of the orders that they are giving. The courts, the Supreme Court, the lower federal courts do not have their own army, police force. They have some enforcement mechanisms, but even those are typically dependent on the Department of Justice and the marshals who work for the Department of Justice. And who does the Department of Justice report to? The president. And so I worry, we have seen hints up until now of flouting or disregard of court orders. So far, I don't know that we've seen completely open defiance, or at least open defiance last very long. The short answer is, I think, yes, I do see the federal courts doing an admirable job of attempting to rule based on principle. I worry, though, when push comes to shove, that they may not have the muscle to enforce the principled orders and decisions that they are coming to.
Thank you so much for what you're sharing today. Really an opinion question. Has social media become a friend or foe to the true principles of free speech? And does this facilitate a cultural misunderstanding of the same?
Yeah. I'm tempted to punt and say that's a very complicated question. I mean, I think the answer is both. Obviously, social media does give people a voice who may not have had it before. I can engage in commentary that some of you appreciate on Facebook and do things, and I couldn't have done that otherwise. I couldn't write a letter every day to the HT and expect them to publish it. So yeah, social media in some ways has definitely been a boon, I think, to free speech. It's all in how you choose to consume it and what you choose to follow. I have become less sanguine about the theory of free speech and First Amendment that says in the marketplace of ideas, good ideas, right ideas, true ideas will prevail and eventually will drive out the bad, false, faulty ideas. I think social media doesn't lend itself to that. It's driven by algorithms and bots and all of that. Every time I, decide to sign on to Twitter or X, it's just this overflowing toilet of, of political nonsense and sort of hate and illogic and everything. So, in that sense, I do worry, there's social science literature that tells us about the effect that social media has on people's reasoning ability, attention span, and so forth. I worry that that's a problem. I guess the only thing I can say is if you use it wisely and in a deliberate way, yes, I think I would rather have access to LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook, for my own use than to not have access to it.
We only have time for one more question. Raj, I know you had your hand up and I know Alan had a question. If it's quick, we'll try and squeeze you in as well, Alan, but Raj? Raj?
Yes.
Go ahead, Raj.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sanders. Appreciate your presentation today. I live in Chicago, Illinois, and part of my source of IU campus is the IDS. And as you know, the IDS has been going through upheaval, partly from the government itself in Indianapolis, and major effect impacted it from the university administration. Could you please summarize what you think happened and why it happened and where we're going with the IDS printing copy?
So we have an expert here in Jim Rodenbush. The question was sort of what's happening at the IDS. The short answer is I don't know all of the truth because there is a lot about the decision-making process concerning Jim's job, concerning communication between the administration and the students that to my mind just hasn't become clear. We haven't seen evidence or documents. We've heard a lot of speculation. We have heard people drawing conclusions about motivations. Again, what I have said on Facebook, which some people have, including many of my own classmates. I'm a graduate of the journalism school. I spent 6 years working at the Daily Student in the 1980s, so I feel a connection there. I see the situation as complicated. I see it as a clash between business imperatives, how to move the paper toward off a dependence on print toward a digital future, which was ongoing work. I don't know exactly what the nature of the communication was between the media school about what these special editions would look like. But my bottom line, what I have said, and I'm happy if people will disagree with me on this, that I, in this situation, from what I've seen and what I know, would not use the red letter, all caps word censorship. To me, censorship has a particular meaning. It means prohibiting or punishing speech based on its viewpoint, its content, its subject matter. No one has ever alleged that there's been any attempt at interference in what the Daily Student publishes online, which I venture to say is what most people see and where most people read the news product. There's never been any interference with that. Was the decision to end print or the decree that the special issues could only contain sort of special content and not news content, was that motivated by the fact that the university wanted to suppress what it saw as negative news coverage? That's the implication. I haven't yet seen the proof of that, the smoking gun that I would need to draw that conclusion that that decision was based on animus toward the topic or the viewpoints or the content being published, as opposed to a frustration with a process that was supposed to help wean the paper off this occasional print run and move it more toward digital content. Again, Jim may disagree with me. Jim knows more than I do about the situation. Others may as well. I have just, as I said, I have seen this as a difficult tension between business imperatives. The thing can't keep losing money. The university subsidizes it to more than a quarter of its annual budget and is doing so far uncomplainingly. A tension between that, the deficit, and editorial freedom for the paper. I would say that I think my sense of the task force that the dean of the media school has appointed, based on the people who are on it, looks very good to me. It includes faculty members who have been critical of what's going on. It includes a very prominent media lawyer from Chicago who we at the law school actually nominated and recommended to Dean Tolchinsky. And so I see that as a positive development. What this seems to come down to is all this been happening with goodwill or bad will, or at least bad will or lack of bad will. I have not seen the proof that I would need to draw the conclusion that this has been ill motivated or out of bad will or malice to the paper. Again, I could be wrong. I'm open to evidence to the contrary. That's how I have seen it at this point. I think there's a narrative out there that people have latched onto, that the students are putting out, that people have latched onto, in my mind, uncritically. And I hope, again, I spent 6 years there. It's near and dear to my heart. I hope I'm not dismissing the interests of the paper and the interests of the students, but it's my sort of wanting to see facts and think about all the sides here before I draw a conclusion. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Steve, thank you for a most interesting presentation. I really love the concept of the university being a home and sponsor of critics. In honor of your talk, a donation we made this quarter to the Lake Monroe Water Fund. Remind people in the room, don't forget to sign up for next week's Meals on Wheels project and Salvation Army bell ringing after Thanksgiving. Diana Hoffman for Meals on Wheels, Dave Maurer or Michelle Cohen for Salvation Army bell ringing. Zoom attendees, how do they reach you? Dave and Diana, or do we do it to the roundabout possibly? Okay, we'll get information in the roundabout. I'd like to thank today's volunteers: Ruth Boschkoff, Peggy Frisbee, Byron Bangert, Joy Harder, David Wright, Marilyn Wood, Tracy Ivanovich, Alan Barker, Sarah Laughlin. Also like to thank our staff, Tyler Martin Nichols, and Natalie Jenner Blaze is still doing a little bit of her thing down in Tennessee. She was back for the Rotary Toast, and it was really good to see her. So our next meeting will be on November 18th here in the Georgian Room, and I will lead the quarterly club assembly. And Tyler, if you could put up the graphic for the four-way test. Please stand if you are able. Of the things we think, say, or do, first, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And fifth, is it fun?